I call this meeting to order the Financial Planning Committee, the Appropriations Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the Fire Station Building Committee. John.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome, and appreciate everybody coming out tonight to hear about this very exciting project. The last time we were all in this room together was back in November, and the building committee gave you an excellent update with regard to where we were with the project. At that point in time, we had gone through and done a building assessment, we'd done space needs, and we were in the market for some land. So since then, we have gone out through a couple of different methods to seek some appropriate land in the downtown area. The committee has narrowed in on a preferred site at the moment, and so tonight we have Stu Roberts, who is our architect from Johnson Roberts Associates. Stu is going to walk you through where we are with the project. Since there's a lot of new faces and a good number of folks in the audience tonight, we're going to kind of start with a little bit of background in terms of the need for the project and how we got to this point. But essentially, we're going to roll right up through conceptual design, some preliminary cost estimates, and talk a little bit about what you can expect coming up at town meeting on April 22nd. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Stu, who's going to walk you through his presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. It's always nice to come back to the library. Just to kind of spend a moment, I just want to kind of explain where we are in the process. We've just completed a feasibility study, which is really looking at programming, site selection, some kind of initial concept design, and then trying to establish a project budget. And the point of this is so that we can go to town meeting and get funding to move into the next phase, which is really the design phase. So what I'm going to show you is really the result of its feasibility, its site planning, its site selection. There's still lots of design work that's going to happen, and there'll be lots of opportunity for input into the design as we get into the next phase. So basically the approach is that we're going to town meeting now, and they're looking for funding for site acquisition, and we're looking for funding to fund that next design phase. And the plan would be that a year from now, the project would be designed, we'd hopefully have it bid, and we'd be able to go to town meeting to get the funding for the construction portion of it. So this is really, we're just looking at being able to move forward with the design. So we'll walk through here a little bit. I'm going to give you some of the background. We've spent probably about the last year working on the project, and we've gone through a whole series of steps. We did site visits to a bunch of other comparable stations to get ideas about what works for them, what didn't work for them, any advice they could give us. We developed space planning, so we looked at the specific needs of the fire department to come up with space needs, and I'll share that with you. We took a look at the existing building. We had engineers go in and do a review of the existing conditions. We took a look at the condition of the existing building and the existing site. We did a review of, I can't even tell you how many sites. We really, I think every potential site that we could identify, we took a look at as a potential for siting the fire station. We did an analysis of all those sites. We did conceptual site plans for each of the sites. And then we focused in on doing a site selection phase, which also included then putting out an RFP for site acquisition. And then we finally picked a site, and we did a concept design, which I'll show you tonight. And really the point of that was to form the basis for a cost estimate. So we have a construction cost and a project budget, so the town has an idea of what the budget would be for the overall project before we move into the next phase. So there's still plenty of work to do. So if you had technical questions about like the mechanical systems in the building and all that stuff, a lot of that hasn't been done yet. This is still kind of a big kind of conceptual phase. There we go. So this is just, we started with programming. This is a chart, it's maybe a little hard to see, but we basically identified all the space needs that the department has. And this is really divided into 3 zones. And the reason for that is for firefighter safety, which I'll go into in a moment. But there's essentially a red zone, which is, that has all the apparatus and equipment in it and all the support services that go along with that. There's what we're calling a neutral zone, and there's a green zone, which has the public areas and the corridors. The reasons for doing this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is It's to promote firefighter health. Firefighters have incidents of cancer that are far in excess of the average. And that's due to the fact that they go out on calls and they get exposed to toxins, they get contaminated, they come back to the station, and those contaminants historically have gotten spread all around the station. So current fire station design, we're trying to promote healthy design by designing buildings and systems that will allow for firefighters themselves and their equipment to be cleaned and decontaminated, and then also to design the building such that we don't have toxins that might be in the hot zone, the red zone, with all the equipment getting into where the corridors are or getting into the public zone, because we certainly don't want the public coming to the station and being exposed to any of these kinds of materials. So that's a key part of the programming. In addition to this, I mean, we're really looking at space needs. So we've designed a station that's 6 bays, 6 double bays, and that's to accommodate the equipment that the department currently has, and also allow a little bit for some future acquisitions. There are bunk rooms, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail when we look at the floor plans, but basically this was to kind of outline all of the needs that we needed to accommodate, and we did this first to make sure that we could fit this building program on the sites as we looked at the sites. Now let's see if I can go forward one. Okay. We also took a look at the existing station. So the existing station was built, it was built 42 years ago. And that was back when the population of the town was under 10,000. So I would say in general, the building's been pretty well maintained. This is not a situation where some communities have where the building's just falling down. What's happened is in the 42 years since the station was built, it's the nature of the services that the department is providing has really changed. Now it's a fully professional station, so there are 21 full-time staff. When the existing building was designed, it was a volunteer station, so they don't have the quarters that they need to support the staff that they have. At that time, there were no female firefighters, and in this day and age, we need to make provisions for female firefighters. There's no accommodation for that in the existing building. EMS services were added at some point along the way, so the current station wasn't designed to house ambulances or any of the support that goes along with that. And that's a big part of what the department does now. That's 68% of the call volume from the station. So that EMS services are a very important part of what the department provides, and that wasn't even provided for in the design of the original building. And then finally, we have more and larger apparatus than what was contemplated back 42 years ago. So vehicles tend to get bigger, there's more vehicles. The bays in the current station are a little bit undersized, so it's tight, so there's tight space between, and the ceiling height is such that they can't install a vehicle exhaust system. So that leads to more contamination inside the bays of the station. So we looked at the station. Basically, physical condition is okay. It's just not a good fit for what the current needs are of the fire department. We also took a look at the site. So if you can see the site here, maybe I'll step over here. The site is, here's the current fire station. There's Pierce Street. That's the bounds of the current site. Some of the constraints are we have a brook that flows in the back, and because of that, we have setbacks that would really come back up here into the property, conservation setbacks. So we really can't develop the property any further than it's been developed. There's really just not enough room on the current site to expand the facility on the current existing site. So therefore, we really do need to take a look at expansion, an expanded site. In addition to those issues, there is a bad intersection right down here coming onto Main Street that's been a problem for the fire department to safely get through and maneuver as they get out. So that was one of the disadvantages of this location. So we looked, I think, at just about every site we could uncover. I can't even tell you how many. Some that we thought looked feasible, really anything that we could find. The really minimum criteria was that it needed to be located in the downtown area. So an area was defined, and letters went out to property owners really trying to turn up as much interest in potential locations for a fire station as we could find. We needed about 2.5 acres of developable land, and we needed about 400 feet of frontage. So those are kind of the constraints that we needed in looking for sites. So in response to that, we looked at a bunch of sites, but there were really two sites that really became the primary sites that we were looking for. And that it would be the existing Pierce Street site. This may be a little hard to see, but that's the fire station site right there. And then adding the property at 10 Church Street and 7 Pierce Street, which would give us some room to expand that facility. We also took a look at 6165 West Main Street along with 10 Monroe, which is the house that's located here. We did conceptual layouts for both of those. We did some comparative pricing on it. And really, the 6165 West Main Street was the winner because it was substantially less money. It was, I think, over $1 million less to do a project there. And it had better access. We avoided the intersection that was located down in here. So that was the site that was selected. There was an RFP process that put out requests for proposals, and we did get proposals on both of those sites. So we knew about acquisition costs. So based on that site, we've been working on concept plans, and basically the things that we're doing is we're trying to meet all the needs of the program. But what that really means is we have a design for West Main Street, right? So here's West Main Street. That'd be the 10 Monroe house up here. Fire station located. We have, there's 6 double deep apparatus bays. We're able to lay it out such that fire trucks can drive through so we don't have to back in off the street. They can come in and come straight through. So this is all of the, I'll get into the plans, but that's the apparatus bay. This is a 2-story portion that has quarters above and offices and support spaces down below, and that's a training facility. We have parking located on either side here, and I think we have about 40-some parking spaces, I think, that are shown. We have to do a little bit of grading here in the back because the site slopes down, but we're able to do that and still maintain some fairly reasonable slopes on the back side. So the grading works out. 10 Monroe really helped us because that's the location of the house, and we're able to avoid doing retaining walls in the back since we have that property. Plus, I think a big advantage to the town is the access coming into the property means that the town now has access to the rest of the property, which is up here. So in the future, if there's some other municipal need that wants to go on that site, there's access and a way to get into that upper portion of the site. I'll jump into the building plans. But as I said, I'm going to stand over here and just point at the plans. We had, as we said, we have 6 double deep apparatus bays, right? Here's the apparatus bays. We'll be able to drive through all of the, these are also big enough that there's room between the trucks to maneuver and do maintenance. The bays are high enough that we can do an automated vehicle exhaust system, so we're not dumping fumes directly into the apparatus bay. We've got some quick acting bay doors on the front, and that's a plus because they open quickly, and that means we can cut a few seconds off response time so that the fire trucks and ambulances can get out just a few seconds earlier because of that. There are decontamination facilities that are located. We have some for medical. We have fire decontamination. There's hose cleanings, bunker gear cleaning. All of these are support to try to decontaminate equipment and personnel. It's kind of laid out here. You can kind of see this. It's probably hard to see, but these are the ambulances on this side next to some of the medical supply and the EMS decontamination, and more of the fire trucks on this side, and this is support for the fire services. So hose tower on the front of the building so they can hang hoses up to dry them. There's a hose washing area, bunker gear storage, a couple of decon rooms, toilet room, and a bunker gear cleaning room. That's all support for what happens on this floor. So this area, that's really that red zone. We'd go through a couple of gray corridors, and then everything else down here is the green zone, which I think is important. We have a public entrance that would come in from the street, and we have a training room which also is designed to function as an emergency operations center. So in the case of a natural disaster, this can be set up and be really a coordination place for all the emergency services that would be needed. So this is a flexible room. Furniture can be moved around, but it has all the technology for everybody to hook up and have communications between departments. And that's all accessible in the green zone. So the public can come in. There are public toilets up here. There's a kitchenette, some storage for tables and chairs. From this public lobby, there's also access to the public counter where you could go if you need to get permits, much like you do now. And there's access to a conference room up in the front. So public is really seen as being kind of in this part of the station. Then you can come through this door and we're really in the office portions of the station. So we have the chief in the back, we have captain, deputy's office, there's administrative areas, radio room. So that's really all of the support areas. 2 stairs. This stair was designed to be big enough so that it's open in the middle so that they can do training in there, they can do rappelling, they can do all kinds of things in the stair right in the station. So upstairs is really the quarters. So we go upstairs and the second floor is really just over this one portion of the building. It's not over the bays. But upstairs you'd come up either one of the stairs. There is a kitchen and the day room up in the front of the building. There's the hose tower. There's a corridor along here. We have dorm rooms here. So now we have dorms that can accommodate 2 firefighters. And we have individual changing rooms. And we did this so we could be flexible in accommodating female firefighters. So these are single-use changing and shower rooms, so that if there's one female firefighter, one can be. If it was 50-50, we could divide them up. It gives us the flexibility without building a dedicated male and female kind of locker room. There is also a fitness room in the back for physical training, laundry facilities, and there are a couple of fire poles. We still have fire poles right here and here, so that to get down to the apparatus quickly, you're in and down the pole.
We're still arguing that point. I win.
Okay, so that's basically the plan. I would say probably 90% of the effort that we've done so far has really been on planning, making sure we're getting we're getting a site that works, one that works for the town, getting a plan that works, making sure that we have all the facilities that we need. To move forward with a cost estimate, we needed to do a kind of concept design. But again, let me emphasize, schematic design is the next phase, so design really hasn't started yet. So I'm expecting this is going to look probably very different than it does now. But the concept we came up with is basically, you can see what we have. There's the apparatus bays. This is the 2-story portion. That's the training room, and there's a hose tower in the middle. This is really, we needed to do this because we have to have something to base a cost estimate on. We looked at 2 or 3 different versions, and this was the one that was kind of settled on to send out, but there's nothing that's cast in stone about this. And as part of the next phase, we'll get into the real schematic design phase, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for public input. We'll have public forums, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for input. So what's it going to cost? We sent the plans out to an independent professional cost estimator, and he did a detailed estimate, which I have with me, based on a conceptual plan. But he's included everything in there. He's done lots of fire stations, so he knows the kinds of levels of quality that we need and durability in a fire station. His estimate for that the construction of the station in today's dollars would be a little over $14 million. Now, we're not building it today. We still have to design it, we have to bid it, and we have to get under construction. So what we do is we want to allow for inflation or escalation for 22 months, which takes us to the midpoint of the construction process. So that adds about another $1 million onto the cost. So that we're really talking about $21 in all of this. It's not really today's dollars. We have fees for the architect and for the owner's project manager, clerk of the works. There's some signalization that's included in this, so there's design of signalization that's included in that as well. We have about $380,000 for, it's just furnishings and equipment that needs to be provided for the station. We have some project expenses which include moving and materials testing and survey, and I've got the signalization in here, so that's about $192,000. And then on the whole thing, we want to carry another contingency because this is still early on, and we need to have a contingency to make sure we have a viable budget. So there's a 5% contingency that's basically on all of the project costs at this point. So that adds another $897,000. So rounded, we're at about $18.8 million for the project, all inclusive at this point.
Not including site acquisition.
Oh, yes, and that doesn't, yeah, I should add, that doesn't include the site acquisition, which is a different number, or it doesn't include any sale if you were to get rid of the existing site or do something else with the current fire station. Now we want to do a little benchmarking to see, to kind of check the reality of that number. So we did a little research. We talked with both with our estimator, and we got some information on some other recent fire stations. And we came up with a chart of what fire stations cost. And I think people are often surprised at how expensive fire stations are. I think people tend to think, well, it's just a big garage, right? But it isn't just, it's got tons of equipment in it. It's sophisticated, and it's built to a high level of durability. So if we put the kitchen appliances in the fire station that you have at home, we'd be replacing them every 3 years because they just get so much use. So we have durable materials. There's block walls on the inside. This is designed to really be heavily used. It has lots of systems. It has monitoring systems and energy systems and all kinds of things in it. And that's one reason I think fire stations are as expensive as they are. So we did this chart. I did this chart. We have a whole bunch of fire stations and combined facilities. So some combined police and fire here, fire only down here. These were built over whole ranges of time. I think the oldest one here is about 2007, up to some that are current 2019. So to make that comparable, I needed to do a little analysis, which is kind of off to the side here. But I basically went through and took the construction numbers that I got. So I have the year that it was built, the size of the station, and the construction cost. Then I took the construction cost, and every year I put a factor on for escalation. And I tried to match that to what the actual escalation was for the year. So that changed over time. All that I compounded up to 2021 to at least try to get some kind of a comparable number. And the numbers that I found really average about $600 a square foot for combined facilities and about $612 for fire-only facilities, and that's over a whole range of sizes. Our current station in those 2021 dollars, it would be about $584 a square foot, so we're a little bit below what the average would be of the stations we were able to get data on, just as a kind of check on the budget. Okay, so site acquisition. Town meeting, we're looking for money to do site acquisition. There was a whole site acquisition process. It's all subject to 30B, so we had to, John had to work through and make sure we were following all the rules that we need to have. And the acquisition, the purchase price will be coming up at town meeting. I think John will probably talk about that a little bit more after I'm done. And lastly, just to talk about the schedule again. Basically, where we are on the schedule, we have town meeting and the ballot question, which are coming up. If that's successful, the project would move forward and would move into design. The first step that has to happen is the town needs to hire an owner's project manager, somebody who would help oversee the project. Once they're in place, we would start the schematic design process, which is probably going to run a couple of months. We have a design development process that's going to run a couple of months, and construction documents, which probably run 3.5 months or so. So there's still plenty of design work to happen here between July and February. We're hoping that we can get this out to bid so we can have a hard number by town meeting a year from now. So there's years worth of work between now and having that number. And that would go to town meeting and then another ballot vote. If we're successful, they'd award a contract. I think this is probably about a 14-month construction period, so that means that we'd be moving in something like the fall of 2021. Okay? So that's where we are with the process.
So I don't know, through the chair, if you want to open up the questions to the boards and committees.
Did you want to finish the presentation first?
Well, I think that's basically the presentation. It leads up to, I believe it's Article 20 on the warrant, which is the request for $3.5 million to move forward to fund the full design, the owner's project manager, as well as site acquisition costs. We have some really positive news in terms of this next appropriation, and that is we finished the Lincoln Street building project, $1.38 million under budget. Now, we had issued the bonds, and that, interestingly enough, we followed a very similar process to this. By the way, it's the same process we followed for the senior center as well. Design it, bid it, go to town meeting with the actual design, the bid out cost, so you know exactly how much the project is. Well, we did that on Lincoln Street, but that project went so well for us, and we used virtually none of the contingency funding, and so we have $1.38 million left over from that project. Those bonds were issued, and they can only be used for a similar project, a debt-excluded project of a similar duration, a 20-year project like this one. So of the $3.5 million that is being requested at town meeting, approximately 1.38 of that is money that is literally sitting in the bank, and we are, am I on? Are you? Okay, I'm going to start over now. So hopefully I spoke loud enough that one pick me up. So the positive news here is we have that 1.38 million left over. It can only be used for another project of this nature. So we're talking in terms of the appropriation at town meeting, approximately $2.1 million in new bond issuance. So, but in order to access the remaining budget from Lincoln Street and in order to move forward with this project, this would be a debt excluded project. So it would be excluded from the limits of Proposition 2.5. So under our comprehensive financial policies for the town, all projects of this magnitude would need to be debt excluded. So that's a process whereby it's a two-step. It goes to town meeting for their approval. It's a 2/3 vote at town meeting. Following town meeting, there is a question that will be on the ballot to ask the voters if they're willing to exempt from the limits of Prop 2.5 for purposes of the station. So this appropriation will need to have that ballot approval in order for us to move forward. When we go through and we get the full construction costs and we come back to town meeting for the full construction, that too will require town meeting approval and again another ballot approval. So it's the same process we follow for the library that we're in tonight, same process we follow for the senior center, and the same process we follow for basically Lincoln Street. So I think it's a good approach to break it up like this, so that when you're at town meeting, you're not debating about how much a project is going to cost or exactly what it's going to look like. By the time you come back around, you have the exact design, it's been vetted through a community process, and then you also have the exact cost. And at that point, you just decide whether or not you want to move forward with it. So that's what we have coming up for town meeting. You'll probably see this almost identical, very similar presentation made at town meeting. But again, we're at the point now where well, let me back up. Let me just start with this. We need a new station. That has not been in dispute by anybody involved in this process at all. The station that we have now does not serve the function of our department anymore. It doesn't work. They need more space. We know from this analysis that we cannot expand on that site. That site is entirely paved already, and with the setbacks, as Stu said, the setbacks from the brook, there's no way, there's no place to add on. So you need to either acquire adjacent property or property someplace else. That's the only way we're going to be able to expand. And if you're going to expand, we need to stay in the footprint of the downtown, because we have a service delivery model that allows us to serve from an emergency response standpoint, the entire community from one centralized station. So if we can stay in the downtown and stay in the center, we're approaching, as a community, we're approaching build out. We're not going to grow much more. You know, a big housing start for us, you know, we have 11 houses, you know. Most of our commercial land is developed or will be developed in the next 12 to 24 months. So we're approaching build out. So this model will work. If you can't locate in the downtown, then you're moving to multiple stations, additional staffing, double equipment. It's a much more expensive model. So staying in the downtown is exactly where we want to be. The sites that we've looked at match up for response times. They're both viable sites. The one that we're showing you tonight is the preferred site. It's the preferred site because it's more cost effective, as well as it's a better location to pull out right onto 20 and not have to navigate over the Church Street island. You know, that's a very difficult place to get out. When that station was placed there originally, the traffic and the configuration of the downtown was very different. That's a much more difficult location. It's still viable, but we've got this other site. Frankly, I think most people would love to see that site redeveloped. We've been waiting for somebody to come along and do that, but it is, for us, the best site possible for a new fire station. So I can't stress enough how lucky we are that we've gone through this process and we have an excellent site in the downtown, and the owners are willing to sell it to us. Some of the sites that we looked at, the owners wanted nothing to do with it. They did not want to sell it to the town. And by the way, we papered the entire downtown. If you own property anywhere in that area that was shown up on the slide, we sent you a letter and said, hey, are you interested in selling? Are you and your neighbor interested in putting your properties together and selling? And then we sent letters to every realtor that services the town of Northborough, asking them if they're aware of anybody. The last thing we wanted to do is focus on a site and then come back and, you know, it's like, well, Joe's getting ready to retire, and he would have sold you his whole plaza for, you know, X dollars. We called Joe, we called Fred, we called Mike, we called everybody and contacted them. We are down to the sites that work, and we're very lucky because they're not just marginally viable, but these sites are actually quite excellent for our purposes. And I think that redevelopment in that particular spot also is going to do nice to improve the aesthetics of the downtown area as well. So, but here's the key: no matter what, we know we can't stay where we are, and we know we can't expand where we are. In order for us to move this process forward in any way, shape, or form, we need this appropriation to acquire land and to engage the architect to move forward with the design. What we've engaged Stu Roberts to do to this point is a feasibility study. How much space do we need? And if you put it together, what might it look like? That's the extent, really, of a feasibility study. So we're at the end of that appropriation. So no matter what, we need this next appropriation in order to move forward with the process. And I got to tell you, the costs are what they are. They're higher than I'd like them to be, but I'll tell you what, when we went out and we did the Lincoln Street building project as well, I thought the costs were higher than they should be. Then you go back 10 years when we did the senior center, I thought the costs were higher. I always think the costs are higher than they should be. But the key here is if we're going to move forward and we need a station, we need to deal with the reality that we have before us. And these are the numbers that we're looking at. They're significant. I was at an event about 2 weeks ago with the chief in Burlington, and they're in the process of building a station, and they're coming in at over $600 a square foot. That is the market. That's where it is. It's a very specialized building, but it is what it is. On a positive note, globally, and we can talk a little bit more about this at town meeting, as a corporate entity, our overall debt load right now is about 4%. So bond rating agencies don't want to see a community over about 15%. That looks like starting to be a heavier debt load. Our policy is 5 to 10%. So we have continuously seen our debt service drop off, and we try to time bigger projects when we can bring them in, just like the Lincoln Street building project. Even if you approve this project at the numbers we're talking about, our debt service percentage, in other words, what we're paying in debt as a percentage of our overall budget, will probably be somewhere in the 5 to 6% range. So, and every year that goes by, we will continue to pay that debt off. So I think the important thing to take away is a corporate entity. We have planned well financially, and we can afford to move forward with another large building project. More importantly, as an entity that provides these critical services, we have to have a functioning fire department. I think everybody understands that, and we're trying to deliver that in the most cost-effective way we can. What we're showing you tonight is what we believe that model to be. So, so with that, we certainly can answer any questions about the process, about the station, in terms of the services. The chief is certainly very passionate about what he does and what his team does. I'm sure he can answer any questions that anybody may have. So perhaps through the chair, if anybody on the committees have questions, we start there first, and then we can even open up to the audience if people have any questions they'd like to ask.
Okay, we'll start with committees. Leslie.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for your work and your presentation. That's a lot of great information here. I have a couple questions. The first one is, part of the budget is set aside for supplies and outfitting the new station. What percentage of the current stuff that we own now in the current station can be used or reused in the new one, or is there an issue because the department has to work literally up until the day the new one opens? So I don't know if that affects what can be brought over and when.
So yes, we are somewhat limited in what we can bring over, because we still have to have our extractors in the station. We still have to have our racks in the station and everything else. But the furniture we have right now in the station, we stole from Shrewsbury Fire when they threw it away. Okay, so they bought new recliners. We took their old recliners. There's still a couple old sofas in there that are like butcher block. They've been there for, what, 25, 30 years probably, since the station was built. Great. So most of the stuff we have in there is old. It's outdated. So we'd be purchasing new stuff and put it in there. The refrigerator, the stove, the microwave, those are all old and outdated, and they're all currently residential style. In other words, since I've been there, I can't tell you how much work we've done on the refrigerator. We've probably replaced 2 microwaves, and the stove is trying to hang in there. So very little of what we currently have will be reused as far as the furnishings go. Yeah. So things from the storage areas that we can move over. So we can put some, for instance, Captain Desitel, where he has all of his equipment stored in one of our rooms. All that some of that racking can come over. Some of it can't, because, to be honest with you, it's falling apart and being held together with baling wire, and as the saying goes, literally in some cases. So a lot of that won't come over, but some of it, anything that is still viable, we will bring over and reuse.
If I may, just to kind of follow up on that, one of the great things about this approach here is we're never compromising our fire service by building this new station and then moving over. So there's no service interruption. There are no temporary quarters. There are no questionable constraints that we might have to have in the interim. By doing it this way, the nice thing is they literally open the day they open. They pack up, they move over there, and they're operational. So we did look at, like, if you try to do something with the existing site, you've got to come up with temporary quarters, and that's one of the things that drives the price of trying to build on adjacent property. Is you're going to have to demolish or compromise the building that they're in, which means they're going to have to go somewhere in the interim. So, and that's a significant cost. Beyond the cost, it's a interruption of service, an operational issue. So.
Okay. Second thing, I know that the aesthetics are very important to everybody. So how finalized is it at this point? Is that just a...
If it's being directed to me, I can tell you it's not finalized at all.
Okay.
As you said several times during this presentation, you have to come up with a conceptual drawing in order to get your numbers. That's all it is a conceptual drawing. John, I'll let you go ahead and take it further, but as far as I'm concerned, it is just still wide open.
Again, we had very limited funding to get through the programmatic needs, to figure out what we need for space, whether we could stay where we were or we moved, but you had to get to you got to take, as Stu explained to the building committee, it's just blocks. You know, that second slide that he showed you was, this is how much you need for the apparatus, this is how much you need for administration, this is how much you need for, and they're just blocks, and they have to fit together, and then they have to fit together on a way, on a site specifically, so that you have circulation, you have all the things that you need, and then, frankly, the last piece of it is the aesthetics of how you want the exterior to look. And again, it is a cost issue, and so we want things to look aesthetically pleasing, but we also want to be cognizant of the fact that this is not an inexpensive project, and we want to balance the look of it and the feel of it in our downtown with the costs that the taxpayers are going to be asked to bear. So
this time for input from the public, Master.
very much so. Very much so. Yep.
Just looking to the future, what's the estimate for the lifetime for the building?
Past my retirement, that was the goal. I can't say his retirement because he's already retired. He's already retired. He's on his second job now. Well, the last one, 45 years. This thing is for the foreseeable future, 40, 50 years. I think you need to take care of the building. The fire service will change, but this size, structure, in the location where it is for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, because you just look at the cost and amortize it, if the lifetime of the building's gonna be 40 years, it just helps justify the cost more, at least in my mind, because then you can look at it. It's a 40-year investment,
So I've been in the fire service for 40 years, and so if some of my colleagues here get pretty close to that. And I can tell you the fire service has changed dramatically in those 40 years. Trucks have gotten bigger, they've gotten heavier, they've put all kinds of extra stuff on the trucks. Our mission has changed drastically in 40 years. So can I look down the road 20 years to 40 years and tell you what's going to be? No. But one of the things that intrigued me about this site and about our design is it has that ability. God forbid, trucks suddenly become twice as long as they currently are. We have the ability to actually, in the land, to actually expand it.
So flexibility.
I'll be retired but that's not.
Yeah, no, you can't make this kind of investment. We're not looking, this isn't a 20-year building. Again, we have a tendency to use our buildings maybe past their useful lifespan, like this volunteer station built in 1975, arguably should have been replaced 10 years ago. But what we're doing, as you well know, is we plan out our capital investments very carefully. We don't want the debt to spike too much. We want debt falling off as new debt comes on. And we need to manage the projects in a way that kind of smooths the tax impact over the years. And we need to move around. Senior center, we did a library, we did a school project. Now we do a fire station. I'm hoping we do something with town hall at some point. A little plug in there. I know it's probably a little early for people after showing you this, but yeah, and then we'll get back to another school building, and the key is to smooth out the projects and the investments and the tax impact. That's what good planning is. So, but this is a very long-term building.
Thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, I know we're talking about a capital project here, but in combination with that, you have the operational costs of the new station and everything. I'm just wondering if you have a rule of thumb or something to estimate what the impact is on the operational costs going to this new facility.
Stu, I don't know if you want to take that one.
I don't, quite frankly. I mean, I can tell you this is, the systems that will go in here will be more energy efficient than what you currently have. But they probably will also be, more sophisticated and do more. And we are certainly taking more care with exhausting things, all the nasty stuff out of the building that we want to get out of the building. So I would guess operation expenses, they're going to be a little bit more than currently. Overall, the systems are more efficient, but it's a bigger building. We're probably doing more.
I guess in part, I'm thinking of some of the features that are intended for, health and welfare of the personnel or whatever, and to the extent that the costs are going to increase in order to support those systems. I just want to make it clear that that's certainly a very justified increase in operational costs.
Well, one of the biggest things will be the plywood vent system going in, which is, as Stu mentioned, is the exhaust that hangs from the ceiling. It actually ties right into your exhaust. So you guys have seen a diesel truck when it starts up, what happens, right? Well, that's what right now is exhausting directly into our building. If you go up to my admin's office and you wipe a white cloth across their desk, it will come off black. Okay, and that is with already our current exhaust system that we kind of have in there and kind of works. Okay, so There is a cost involved with that. There's a cost of running it because it's electricity, there's a cost of maintaining it. We've had several guys already go through cancer ballots. 1 in 5 right now of us are developing cancer. Retired firefighters are dying from cancer.
Firefighters, not Northborough.
Firefighters. Well, several Northborough firefighters have had run-ins with it. But the fact is, we need to make sure that we're addressing that. And it's critical that we go with this kind of setup to do that.
Yeah, just to follow, frankly, one of the reasons why we picked Stu Roberts and his firm is because he was hired by the city of Boston to develop model design guidelines for fire stations. And a big part of that was pressurizing the building, keeping the zones so that when they come back with their turnout gear and it's contaminated, that it never finds its way into where they eat or they're relaxing or they're doing their other administrative work. And that is, that's one of the differences between the old style fire stations and what really is appropriate to be built today. It's also one of the driving forces behind some of this cost per square foot numbers that you're seeing there.
I was telling John earlier today, we were chatting about when I came up as a young firefighter, and my boots and my night hitch, which everyone wears now.
No, there's a horse and buggy joke.
No, it was at the end of my bed every night. That's where it went. When we went up to our dorms, we brought our hitches up with us, and they were dirty and filthy and contaminated and they stunk. And that's where they went because we jumped up in the morning and jumped in, and we didn't put. That was our pants. We didn't. Nowadays, that stuff never leaves the apparatus floor. We have signs all over the station. Do not leave. So we're making progress, but we have a lot more way to go.
Okay, anyone else from board or committee? Julianne?
So, excuse me, I have just a couple procedural questions. So is this process going to be like a private business that would go onto that site where they would have to go before groundwater advisory, earthworks?
Well, they'd have to follow the same process that any development would have to follow.
So they'll have to go before all of those committees then?
Your question is, are they going to go before design review? They'll go before design review.
Okay. Well, I was thinking actually more the other two, but yeah, that's good to know. So the site that we have right now, we know has been determined to be clean by DEP, or is that still a process?
You're talking about the site that we're looking at, 61 to 65? Yeah, so as part of our feasibility study, we had our LSP go in and review the records and the files, and the site has been remediated. So that doesn't mean there aren't still something that can be found there when you pull a slab up, if there is a floor drain or something like that. But as you know, it was a gas station. The tanks are out and the site has been remediated, and we had, again, our LSP go in and look at all those records. So we'll make, like we did for White Cliffs, appropriate provisions in the purchase and sale to make sure that we do our due diligence further, and that if there are any issues that need to be taken care of, it would be on the owner. If you remember, we bought White Cliffs, we did our 21E review, found there was a tank underground, and that was a extremely expensive remediation, but that was on the owner because it wasn't a known or disclosed part of the purchase and sale, so they had to remediate and fix that. So, but by all accounts, the site is clean.
And we even took it a step further, and we called Mass DEP, our contacts in the fire department there, and spoke to the people that did the final remediation, and they said it's a great location for the fire station for that reason.
Oh, that's good to know. And so, one more question. So, will there be a traffic impact study at all to determine how it will affect, traffic flow on?
We can talk about that. I just don't see that this would be something that would have any impact. Again, they're coming out on Route 20 now. The traffic impact that they have right now in the center, getting out of Church Street right now, is far more of a detrimental impact than, basically what happens is we have an Opticon, the light flashes, you stop, they pull out. So that's...
Well, I guess people are worried about, how sometimes traffic really backs up in town, and so a fire truck has to come out. Will there be a light there? Will we need a light there?
Yeah, as Stu said, under the project expenses, the Opticon, so they're able to trigger the Opticon and control the lights when they leave with a with the fire truck to make it red. It stops the traffic so they can pull out safely. So it's safe for the traveling public as well as the apparatus that's trying to get out. So at the entrance, there will be a light there that they'd be able to control that would allow them to get out safely.
And they'll only use 20, not Monroe or...
Well, I don't know where you go on Monroe.
You can't get out.
Well, you're buying Monroe.
Yeah, but there's
Yeah.
no road.
There's nothing back there. There'd be no reason to turn down
The
that.
main reason for buying that is the grading, because it would cost us how much to put a wall there?
Oh, we looked at that, and I can't remember the number, but it was several $100,000. It's a substantial cost.
Thank you.
Okay. John, you want to open it up to everybody else, and you can see them better than I can?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if any other question, if anybody has any questions, anything that we covered that we can answer? Oh, all kinds of folks. Sure, we'll start with you.
Maybe a little advance, what do they do with the wastewater when they wash down contaminated equipment? Where does that go?
The question is wastewater.
Yeah. So because it is a fire station, because we park stuff inside, because the trucks have oil and grease and all that, we have to have oil grease separators, and they go into a separator. And there should be nothing on the trucks. If we were exposed to a hazardous chemical, whole nother ballgame, we wouldn't even be washing it. The trucks would never leave the site. They'd be decontaminated and neutralized on the site.
Yes.
I want to be clear on the site as to what's going to be acquired. This is the gas station, there's a residence. Is that part of the total acquisition?
Yeah, 61 to 65 West Main. If you're near Dunkin' Donuts, looking almost across the street, there's a house with a adjacent structure to it, and then there's the old gas station structure itself. All of that parcel would be included.
Is there an agreed upon price for acquiring the property?
So what we did is we went through a request for proposals. So we basically put out a request for bids, and we did receive formal bids from them. And so for 61 to 65, the bid price was $1.2 million for that parcel.
And how does that compare as far as the evaluation of that property for some other commercial venture?
Well, it's funny, if you talk to the person who owns it, he can sell it for a lot more, but he's doing the town a solid at $1.2 million. It will be subject to, we'll do an appraisal on it. It'll be subject to a purchase and sale agreement, all of those things. Again, keep in mind when we did the Town Common project, we had a quarter-acre lot, just a quarter-acre sliver lot with nothing on it, and the appraisal for that was $450,000. So this is 3.47 acres, I think, of land, prime land right on Route 20. So, again, the appraisal will bear out, but, the cost is going to be what it is. Yes.
Do you ever see us getting more, I think it's like 22 firemen now, do you see that in the town's almost built up? Are we going to increase the fire people that are there and trucks and what else?
So one of the reasons we put 6 bedrooms in here is because if we had to in the future double 12 guys a shift, which I, in my mind, can't foresee, we would have plenty of room. So if we did, we have plenty of room to accommodate that.
I think more importantly, if we, and the chief brought this up in our meetings, if we had an emergency and we call back everybody and we bring our call firefighters in, or if we need to bring other folks in, this would allow them, us to put all those folks up. So it has the immediate surge staffing needs if there's an emergency, as well as long-term, the question of, 50 years down the road. I can't tell you right now, we've got 4 people in a room that's the size of a little bigger than one of these rooms that are on here now.
Firefighters snore loud and they irritate each other. Am I wrong?
All you for is
And more importantly, if somebody's sick, your entire force gets sick if they're in that close quarters.
And I just want to expand on that for just a second. We work in a sick business. We deal with sick people every day. When I say we, I mean these guys. Because if I'm in the back of the ambulance with you, you are in trouble. But it can happen. But we work with sick people all the time. When you come back, one person gets exposed, and you're sleeping in a bedroom with 3 to 4 other people. What happens to those 3 or 4 other people? And now we got 3 or 4 people that are out sick at the same time, Now we're backfilling with overtime, or we're trying to cover, and it gets crazy. So this will help, I think, a lot with some of those issues.
And just as for those of you that may or may not be aware of this, I know the folks on the boards and committees are, back in 2015, we spent a considerable amount of money to have a full operational review of the police department and the fire department, and we looked at staffing because there was a concern or a question about what the appropriate level of staffing is. That process went for over 12 months, and basically what came out of it was we were running 4 people per shift, and what came out of it is if we can get to 5 staff per shift, that added like 40% capacity to what they can do, because you can run a fire apparatus or an ambulance or 2 ambulances at the same time. That's the sweet spot. And so we spent 3 or 4 years adding a firefighter per year to get to that, and we're at that sweet spot. So we are at the staffing that we all agreed, and by that, the gentlemen over here, they were involved at the seat at the table, appropriations, financial planning. As we do everything in this community, nobody's off on a tear and a tangent on their own. Everybody gets a seat at the table. We have good information and good process so that what comes out the other side, we hope, has got broad support. So that staffing level where we are today, that's in agreement with the firefighters, with the fire chief, with the boards and committees, with the administration, and what I, as your town administrator, feel that we can sustain reasonably. So, and it's the safest for the firefighters themselves as well as the public. So we're at that level right now. In the future, could we see a development come through or something that would require us to hire more folks? You know, at some point we're going to hire more staff across the board of all agencies. But right now we're right where we all believe we need to be. So
You're never going to find a fire chief that's going to tell you, oh, I'm happy with how many I have. You're always going to want more. But do I think the town's made great efforts and great strides and really looked into this and did a great job with it? Yeah, I do. I think 5 is an awesome number for us to have. And adding 1 person doesn't just add 1 person. It adds like all these extra things they can do. I did a big study when I was doing my master's degree to see what 1 person does. And it actually does more than just 25% on a 4-man shift. It actually does about 40-some%. Because you can do all those extra events, as John was speaking out. You can roll more apparatus, you can do more things, and more importantly, you can do things faster and safer. So, you know, it's great. I think the number we're at now is good. Could we go higher in the future? I can't predict.
the important thing is we're where we need to be now, and this facility would serve us for any reasonable potential future expansion. So, does anybody else have a question? I just want to give someone else a chance.
I have a couple questions.
Yep.
This site is not a done deal, is that correct?
Well, not unless town meeting approves it and the voters approve it.
Okay. Did you talked about this is your preferred site? What's the second, or is there a backup site?
Well, if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, Stu showed there's this site and then the 11 Pierce Street where the existing station is.
Yeah.
The folks that, the laundromat and then the other building, the specialties building and 10 Church, those were in play. And so we looked at those. And one of the things is, outside of just the cost being higher and logistically not working as well, the other factor was, you know, the specialties building is a nice historic building that's actually being used by businesses, as opposed to 6165. Technically, I think it's a historic building, but it's got all kinds of structural issues and problems with it, and I don't think anybody thinks it really adds much to the character of the community. But the nice thing was those are bonuses to the fact that it works better and it's more cost-effective as well. So, but those were the 2 sites, and frankly, we had everything else we looked at really wasn't viable. It's very difficult to site a fire station in your downtown for a community like us that's approaching build-out. The land just isn't available. And frankly, the last thing you want to do is find yourself in a situation where you're looking at taking property by eminent domain. I've done that. That is not a process you go into lightly, which is why I say we're very fortunate because we have a beautiful, viable site, you know, 2 viable sites, one preferred over the other, that the owners of the property are willing to sell. So that's a great place to be. So,
John, I think one thing that needs to be addressed too is the benefits of having a building left over to either warehouse or use something in the town. We didn't address the uses of the fire station and how even though 61 to 65 West Main Street comes out to be less expensive, on top of that, we will have something left over.
Yeah, so Selectman Rand's point is well taken. Once we vacate the existing fire station, they move into the new station, we have the old facility. So we have the building and we have the land. We can look at repurposing it to another municipal use. We could sell it, we could redevelop it. I mean, that in and of itself is a whole nother separate process, and we're not ready to go there just yet. We need to get this passed at town meeting and get moving, and then we can start having some discussions. But one option is just to sell that property and use it to offset the cost of the new station. That is an option. There's not a lot of land in the downtown, and so you want to take a good hard look to see if there's another municipal use. If there isn't, by all means, we should surplus it. Yes.
I just have a couple questions and a comment. So you mentioned the Lincoln Street School and the decoration and all that. Does this delay any other building projects like Peasley School or anything like that that was on the, I thought it was on the timeline somewhere there?
Yeah, so the question, so everybody at home can hear this, the question was, what does this project do to other large projects like Peasley School? So Peasley School is, first of all, they're all on a 6-year capital plan. So this project is on deck right now. Peasley is out 5 years or so. One of the big constraining factors when it comes to school building projects is it's not just up to us, it's up to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And so the Massachusetts School Building Authority is the grant program by which we receive funds to build new schools. So in the case of Lincoln Street, it was a $25.5 million project, and we had a grant of $10.4 million, not to exceed. Turns out we didn't use it all because it came in under budget. But MSBA determines whether or not your project moves forward. And the fact that we just got, in their minds, Lincoln Street means we sort of go to the bottom of the list again and you percolate back up. So a constraining factor is when we can afford to do the project and when that project would come into our capital planning. But frankly, more importantly, is when the state is willing to bring us up on the list and fund us. So we have to file a statement of interest. Just for instance, I think Lincoln Street took 3-4 years, multiple filings of a statement of interest before we were finally able to convince the state that to fund the project and to move forward. But we just finished that project. They're not going to give us another project in a year or 2 or 3. So this project is ahead of Peasley anyway, and we'll see how MSBA looks in a few years.
Okay. My other question was just, I had trouble following the answer about the traffic light that Julianne asked. So will there be another traffic light added there, or is it?
There'll be not a traffic light. It's not gonna be on a timer stopping traffic unnecessarily. It will only stop traffic when these guys are headed out to an emergency call. That's it.
So there'll probably be 2 flashing yellow lights or 1 flashing yellow light, probably 2. They only trip if we're going to an emergency call, because that's what our outcomes are on. And then they reset right after we're clear. It just stops the traffic so we can get out without having to, try and sneak out. And then it's clear.
Okay, that makes sense. So it makes my day when I can hit all 3 greens.
Yeah. How do you do that? 'Cause I never make it through all of them.
And my comment was just, I appreciate there'll be a public type of conversation about the design, and I was glad to hear that. So.
Yes.
John, are there any funds available from the federal government or the state to offset building a fire station?
Oh, Henry. So, I had a very, very long conversation with our state reps and expressed my frustration that we were able to get grant funding to assist with the library that we're in tonight. We were able to get $10 million for the school project. There is no state grant program for fire stations. And frankly, I think that is a significant oversight. I also asked our legislative delegation if they'd be willing to put in an earmarked grant just for Northborough. And they're receptive to that, but basically said the chance of that coming to fruition is very slim. But in my experience, if you don't seek a grant or ask, you have a 100% chance that you're not going to get it. So, the short answer, Henry, is that there is no grant program for fire stations, but that won't stop us from trying to find funding somewhere, somehow. But I'm being realistic with the folks that are in this room, that there isn't some golden egg out there that if we just look hard enough, we're going to find. So we need to be prepared to move forward with this project on our own.
Does that include Homeland Security and federal funds?
Yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, it does. There was a period 10 years ago when they came out with this grant to build new stations. But the station had to be completely designed, completely approved, had to be in place, had to be shovel ready. And that was a one-time, one-shot window that left. The only thing that's out there now is the AFG, which is the firefighters grant, which is normally dedicated to like the Scott packs that we just got, or apparatus, or that type of stuff. It is not dedicated. You can sprinkle a building. It's not sprinkled, but you have a heck of a time trying to build a building.
We may pursue grants that might help with some of the either equipment or furnishing or something like that. You might find a grant for some of the FF&E aspects of it, but the building itself, right now there's no formalized program, unfortunately. And I say that it's a shame. Frankly, I can't believe that the state doesn't have. Why would you have a grant program for libraries but not public safety or schools?
I can tell you that.
Yeah, good question, Jim.
Just a kind of concern, it's just like that there's been several projects all along this part of Route 20 of like cutting into the hill, and is there any concern with just keep on cutting into this hill, like long term could retaining walls fail? Like, is there any concern with continuing to cut?
Well, I mean, that's a civil engineering question, but the nice thing about this site, if you're facing it from the road and you're looking at it, as you move to the right, it's a steeper cut into the hill. Next time you come out of Dunkin' Donuts with your double latte, stop for a moment and look across, right? It's actually relatively decent grade. The further back you go, the higher up it goes, but that's one of the reasons why the architect has recommended buying that house in the back corner, because it'll allow us to grade it back and terrace it back and not have to build expensive retaining walls, which then will never fail. So.
There's a question over here. Yes?
Well, it's more comment. I'm a little bit disappointed it doesn't appear that disposition of the old station is not the preferred use of the old station, and the proceeds used to mitigate these costs. Keeping in mind, we're still sitting on the old station on Church Street 42 years after we vacated it.
You want to buy that? I'll sell it to you real cheap. And by the way, the reason why, just the comment was, the old station that's on Church Street. We held on to that. When I first started here, I was going to surplus that, basically get rid of it. We have no municipal use for it. The structure isn't sound, but we didn't want to get rid of it because we knew we were going to do a widening project through there, and we're going to fix that culvert, which is now complete. But the idea was I didn't want to sell that and then have to buy at a premium or take by eminent domain the land necessary to get a turning lane in there. So that's one of the reasons why we held on to that. Now, at some point, we do need to get rid of that. That building, frankly, has no value. It's completely gone. In terms of the 11 Pierce Street station, as I said a few moments ago, the disposition of that is undecided. So that's to be determined. Yes, Leslie?
This is just a quick process question. Does the state have to get involved in terms of authorizing the light to be installed, since Route 20 is a state highway? And is there any fear that they would not approve it or approve it in time or anything like that?
No, I don't think there's a fear that they won't approve it, but they do have a lengthy process, and the permitting and the design costs are built in specifically for that in the budget that you saw. So it's anticipated. It's one of those, I wouldn't say it's a long lead time item, but we have a good relationship, obviously, with the state. And we'd be talking to them early about the project because you have to get your curb cuts approved as well as that lighting. So, but that's built into the schedule and it's built into the budget. Yep. Yes.
Since we're talking again about those lights on Route 20, can we also get one to face Dunkin' Donuts to stop people from sneaking out when the light goes on? I'm sorry, it's already a bad place to drive by, as I think we all know that. But I can see the light going on and someone wanting to come out and beat the fire truck. So I don't know if there's a way to help that at all, but.
Tell you, people always want to beat the fire trucks.
Well, I'm
People
sorry.
don't want to pull
I
away,
agree.
people don't want to pull over,
It's just
or they
a
just
thought.
stop in the middle of the road because they don't know what to do.
Just a thought.
But no, I don't think it's, yeah, I can see them trying to do that.
Through the chair, any other questions or?
Just one question. This is a dream fire station. Are there any other breakdowns in pricing for the necessity fire station somewhere in the
Yeah,
back?
this is not a dream fire station. This is the necessity of what's needed.
So this is the bare minimum of what most fire stations are going to be?
And that's where we spent the better part of a year looking at the programmatic needs and the space needs specifically to get to this point. This isn't a dream station. This is what the town needs, but going back to Tim's comment, it's for today, but also it's going to last us. You don't want to build a station that is 10 years from now obsolete or not meeting the needs. So
But I know if there were phase options.
I'm not sure what you mean by phase options.
In other words, we can do this now, maybe in 10
And add on to in the future.
That sort of-
In order to get all the pieces that we need to have a fully functioning station, those pieces all need to be in place. They're all critical to the operation of what they do.
A question about the exhaust and that system. So right now, the fire station that you do have, and you come in and you're taking out your uniforms and such, do you have a place that you clean those uniforms already?
We have an extractor within the station, which is it's a big wash machine, right? And the extractor is it's just like if you go to a industrial laundromat, they have big extractors. You have to turn it, but the one we have fits one set of gear. So when we're trying to wash 5, 10, 15 sets of gear, it takes forever. So we need a big, yes, but we do have that extractor, but that's great for washing one set at a time. We need a bigger one. We have no place to dry our gear right now. So unless it's contaminated, it goes back in the rack in the station.
Well, that leads me to the next question. When you start getting into contaminated uniforms or wherever you go and have this, your venting system and all that, once it goes through the venting system and it's out into the air, what happens to that point? I mean, have the filters, away the carcinogens or whatever that come through there?
Those are two different things you're talking about. So the venting system is tied into our exhaust. Okay? The only thing that's coming out through there is diesel exhaust. So when you start the truck up, you get that exhaust that goes up through. It does go through a system of filters and things, and it exhausts up high above the station. That's the thing.
That's the same exhaust when they drive down the road, and you drive your car, that's coming out. It's nothing different.
Yeah. This is our gear storage area. So all our gear will be kept in here. This is our gear cleaning area. Jeff, did you want to speak to the pressurization? I don't know if you have, as far as her question, where that stuff goes. I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but.
Do we have like 2 hours?
I should introduce, this is Jeff Davis from our office, and he's been working with me on a lot of these fire station projects.
The same thing I am as far as firefighter safety, and he knows this actually better than I do, so.
Well, thanks, Chief. Hi. One of the things that took a lot of time, as Stu said, as everyone has said, is just making sure that we're doing the right thing. And part of the right thing is trying to stay as healthy as we can. And when you really look into the concept of health and firefighting, it's amazing how unhealthy we have been for a long, long time. So one of the simple things that we can do is just what everybody has said, is make sure that the good air always goes to the bad, which means that in the red zone, that air never gets into the rest of the building that goes outside, that the red zone air is made up of good air from the other parts of the building and from outside. It sounds simple, and in some ways it is, but it's through pressurization. There's a lot of fans that'll be put into this thing, and as the chief said, the Plima vent or the vehicle exhaust will take a lot of the initial stuff out. We've got ambient air that's inside the station, so there's going to be air changes that are going around almost all the time. And today we've got controls that can allow computers to sense what's going on in the air. So when the air gets bad, we get more air changes. Red zone, that air always stays in that area and the stuff that's in there. And one rule of thumb, the only thing that ever touches the floor in the red zone are tires and feet, because that's where the bad stuff falls down in an emergency response area.
Yeah, so I think the question is, when we exhaust, so that bad stuff, where's it going when it exhausts? So the stuff that's coming off of our equipment, when it does go outside, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think that's what you're asking.
Well, most of that stuff isn't airborne. It goes right on the ground, and then we sweep it up and it gets thrown out. So we don't have a lot of fumes that are off-gassing from our gear, that when our gear comes in bad, we wash it, we hang it, we dry it. It's not really outgassing too much as just holding the carcinogens in that's close to our body. Hoses, machines, all that stuff's the same way. So when we wash, it falls down, goes out. The airborne stuff's the stuff that's a little trickier, and that's the vehicle exhaust and any other stuff that may be outgassing. Sorry.
No, that's good. So then you've got stuff, you've got to clear the filters and that sort of thing, because clearly you're going to have to, it has to go through some process of cleaning and so on. So what do you do with all of that? What do you do with the filter system? Does that get taken care of every 2 months, or how does it?
It's a regular maintenance program, and that's part of this whole design process, is that as equipment gets selected, part of this is going to be operating, and part of the expense for the longer term. There was a question about operational stuff, and the question was answered, I think, accurately, that operations are going to go up because we're doing so little now.
And then how does all the fans and the sounds and everything else affect the neighborhoods behind it? Because isn't there a neighborhood that's behind it? Or is it all just?
Most of that stuff is actually inside the building, and wherever it's not, we really have to look at that from an acoustic point of view. We try and have sound that goes down rather than up, so that we have to be kind to our neighbors. We've got to do the right thing. Not only can't we put pollutants outside, but noise is a pollutant too. So probably most of the equipment's going to be interior. A little bit of exterior. We'll have a generator and some other things, but we'll look carefully at the placement of that.
All right, and then you just clean the inside of the building and the vehicles in the building.
The building part of the day of a firefighter is cleaning. That's a huge chunk.
Some of them, a large part of the day, Rob. Look at Rob, yeah. The trucks get washed normally inside, okay? But, so because of the weather and all that, right? But if most of this truck's getting washed is road dirt. So if we're not coming from a call, we're just bringing it back because we were driving proper weather, and it's nice outside now, we'll wash it outside. Is it just no different than washing your car or any other vehicle outside? If there's contaminants, it's a whole other ballgame when we do things differently now.
Any other questions?
Chief, how long does it take to clean a set of gear, your gear?
How long does it take to clean a set of turnout gear? About 40 minutes in the extractor and probably 24 hours to dry. And right now we're hanging our stuff. If you come into the station after a fire, it looks really cool because there's gear everywhere because we don't have dryers. You can't put dry gear in a conventional dryer. You have to buy a turnout gear dryer, which we do not have now. So that would be part of the stuff that we did, would help dry the gear slowly with warm air, not have hot air, so it doesn't break down the fabric that it's made out of, and doesn't lessen our protection at all.
So we got time we'll take one more question, and I think we'll want to start wrapping up. So,
This is about a $20 to $25 million project when it's all said and done. And I'm wondering what the impact might be on our property tax rates.
So we need to still run, we still need to run those numbers, but just for an order of magnitude, the Lincoln Street building project was about a $14 million project, and it added about $180 to the average tax bill. So, I don't want to get stuck with a number. I'd like a chance to refine the budget a little bit and put a number on it. But it's going to be it'll be a couple $100, maybe $230 on the average single-family home, somewhere in that order of magnitude. But we'll run those numbers for town meeting. So, any other questions? Okay, I said last question, but we'll do last question.
It seems very impressive, all the work that's been put into it to date. I know there are a lot of steps yet, but I would like to commend everybody for the presentation tonight and all the work that's been put in to make it happen.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And there's a lot, as you say, there's a lot more work to be done. And but in order for us to proceed with this, we need the support of all the boards and committees and the public at town meeting, but equally as important at the ballot.
If you stop at the station sometime to grab a permit, to drop off cookies for the firefighters like people do all the time. Occasionally, if you stop in and you have time, don't be afraid to ask one of the captains. There's 4 captains here, 4 captains. Please stand up. Please stand up. These are our 4 captains. Find one of these 4 guys and say, hey, I'm curious, can you show me what the station looks like and what your, I'll tell you who are, what your problems are. I think it would be happy to either take you through or assign you somebody to take through. So, or if I'm around, I'll take you through, but I can never stop talking.
On that note, unless any of the board or committee members have any other questions,
I'm just wondering if you could just introduce the members of the fire building committee, just to...
sure. So we're being asked to introduce the building committee. I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start up here with the chief.
Hey, fire chief. Captain Jamie doesn't know. Captain Jamie will
Don Rand.
Elaine Kelly.
Oh, wait, stop. Sorry.
That's okay.
Don Rand from the Board of Selectmen, Elaine Kelly from Appropriations serve on as well as Kim Foster, the Assistant Town Administrator, myself serve on the committee as staff. So, but it's been a very good process and a lot to still do, but I think we're making great progress. So. With that, thank you for your time, and we are recording this, so we'll put this out on local access, and we'll find a way to get the presentation up on the website so people can see some of the slides in a little bit more detail as well. But thank you all for joining us this evening.